This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 896, recorded on Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. How to Save the Planet. It's a dart and a bullseye. That's what we do. Hey, everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we are going to fill your head with doom, dart, and pong. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Every once in a while, the sage words of the late former president of the United States, Ronald Reagan, ring in my ear. What would this country be without this great land of ours? Which is a really interesting question to ask. Obvious answers to that question are many. Not in lands stolen by genocide and enriched by slavery is one. India, if Columbus was right about geography. Another would be that before reaching land, a flotilla of Spanish explorers starved to death in the open ocean, devouring first the meager goods that they had brought, and then eventually each other, before shriveling up like a bunch of New World fruits they would never know the taste of. Or it could have stayed in England or France or any number of mostly European lands, where the ideas of democracy had been fomenting for decades. But what would that even be? Would that even be America? Is America a place, an idea, a mixed bag of historically well-intentioned and evil-intentioned actions? What makes a country a country? Is it the people? And what happens when those people no longer have a homeland? We are used to seeing it to some extent. Tibet, Palestine, Kurdistan, previously in Ukraine, to every indigenous peoples of the Americas, all the former British colonies and Russian-held territories, Thailand maybe, Texas according to some, and the list goes on. But even in these cases, the people were still there. The lands still existed. Currently, there are multiple nations with flags, national anthems, UN membership cards, who are facing the very real prospect of losing their island nations to climate change. The Maldives, Tuvalu, the Marshall Islands, Nauru, and Kiribati may become uninhabitable by the end of this century, inundated with rising sea levels, creating 600,000 landless citizens. Some are already attempting to secure future recognition by the UN to maintain fishing rights in these areas, while others are seriously contemplating the possibility of creating floating cities. As terrible as it sounds, it's only the beginning if actions are not taken soon. And the best thing you can do right now is ask the question, what would this world be without this episode of This Week in Science? Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind I can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again. Oh, Blair, you're wiggling your head around. You're ready.
It's happening. It's here. My head is full of it.
You got it sloshing around. You're so full. I mean, I'm hoping that a little bit of that science knowledge and curiosity will splash out during the show tonight. So don't keep it too tame. That's all I got. Never. Yeah. Well, while the world is doing what the world does and we are learning what we can, let's have a good show, shall we? I have stories tonight. What did I bring? I have a story about shoving asteroids, toddler teeth, the Robo Revolt, and brains playing Pong. What do you have for us, Justin?
I have got doomed nations, two different examples of precognitive ability to tell when earthquakes are going to happen.
Ooh, precognitive. I'm all about knowing things before we should know them. Yes.
And a potato pathogen that could save the world.
Okay. Yeah. How to save the world? Potato pathogens. That is coming up next on This Week in Science.
French fries.
Oh, no. You might not be. Yeah. The Earth might survive, but French fries
What's the
will
point without potato?
Blair, what is in the animal corner?
I have camouflage, confusing camouflage, actually a direct contradiction to a previous camouflage story on the show. And then also I have wow, I can't talk today. A story about bad pets. So we'll talk about that.
Bad pets?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh. I only like the good pets. You're a good pet, Cappy. You're a really good pet over there. Good kitty. Anyway, we're all here for the science. And if you are not yet subscribed to This Week in Science, you can find us all places that podcasts are found. Look for us on Apple, Google, Spotify, and other places. We're all over the place. We stream live weekly Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Pacific time-ish. And you can find us there on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. We are TWIS Science on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. Everywhere else, just look for This Week in Science. Our website is twis.org. That's the thing that makes it all easy. If I could remember
be
it,
that
so
kind of
can
show.
you.
Yeah. I'm excited. This is great.
You guys, seriously, I want you to realize that I have set up my camera now so that the top quarter of my head is not visible. I don't know.
Perfect.
No, it's all good. We're just having a great time here. Are we ready to jump in?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's start with the big, wonderful news of the week. We've been talking about the DART mission.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
Very important, especially the more and more I learn about that giant meteorite asteroid that slammed into and extincted 3/4 of the planet's life 65 million years ago. It makes it like, whoa, well, maybe we really need to find a way to protect ourselves in the event that something like that wants to happen again.
Yeah, you got to think one step ahead, because like if we don't die from climate change, there may be an asteroid. So we have to make sure.
It's a real big shoulda. Oh, we coulda. Oh, we shoulda. Why didn't we? But we're doing it.
And maybe we now could. Yes. So NASA's DART, Double Asteroid Redirection Test investigation team has come out with their analysis of the data, and it was a smashing success. Yes. So they have impacted Dimorphos with the DART craft. It changed the orbit of this moonlet around Didymus by 32 minutes, shortening the 11-hour, 55-minute orbit to 11 hours and 23 minutes. But there is also error bars that are included in this whole situation as well. So plus or minus 2 minutes. And they were only expecting a change of like 73 seconds.
So now it is on course to slam into the planet.
This is what I was going to say. I thought you want to increase the orbit. You don't want to reduce the orbit. Well,
okay. So it depends on where you're trying to make it.
It's like the easy way out.
No. It depends on what you are aiming at. We were aiming at this little moonlet, and we wanted to adjust its orbit so that it would tighten the orbit slightly, because we didn't want to shoot the moonlet away from Didymus.
And hit something else.
Something else, right? So this is they're looking at the complex system of the orbital dynamics of the asteroid Didymus, the planetoid Didymus, and its little moonlet. And you don't want to take that little moonlet and kick it off into space where it can go do whatever it's going to do. So by tightening the orbit, it just means that it's a little tighter of an asteroidal system. It's not more dangerous to us. It hasn't put anything in Earth's path that wouldn't already have been in Earth's path. This is not increasing danger to humanity at all. But what it did show...
This is going to be a terrible movie.
I know.
I'm just saying, you had your whole story mechanism built in to this one big event, and you blew it.
Yeah. So anyway, no danger. There's no danger. There's no movie
danger
right now. There's no, I mean, the plot of this movie, it's a documentary. We are looking at the future of our Earth protection system. So if we do have the time between detection of some massive body on its way to impact the Earth and that actual impact, we could possibly send a mission like this that could nudge whatever body it turns out to be away from the Earth.
And it does show that there is actually a really good use for the Space Force, where their ability to... What was that? Oh, it's NASA? Oh,
yeah,
never
not
mind.
Space Force. This is NASA.
Never mind. Never mind. Space Force is still useless. Never mind.
NASA, however, is
totally awesome.
Just always knocking it out of the park. I have to say, I continue to be just utterly impressed by the competency and even beyond of the people who envision and follow through with these missions and make them happen. I mean, it's just amazing. So, okay, everyone who is afraid about the asteroids impacting our planet and killing off humanity like the dinosaurs were killed off, maybe, just maybe, we have a chance. Yeah. Justin, what do you want to talk about?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. I should probably look at my stories and see what the... Oh, this is oh, that's goodness.
I was just saying that we're going to save humanity. You're dooming us, though, aren't you?
Well, it's not my fault.
With you.
It's not my fault. So in the disclaimer, I talked about the 5 nations that are now fighting with the UN to form some form of statehood recognition in the advent that there's no longer land associated with their nations.
Yeah.
There's places on land that might also be running into this. The UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, as well as the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, released a report in advance of next month's COP27 Climate Change Summit in Egypt. The report highlighted a few places where heat waves brought on by climate change are predicted to, and this is their words, exceed human physiological and social limits. So in the Sahel, which is Sahel is, I guess, northern Africa, basically, as well as the Horn of Africa and South and Southwest Asia, the predictions are extreme events triggering large-scale suffering and loss of life. There are clear limits beyond which people exposed to extreme heat and humidity cannot survive, the report said. We don't want to dramatize it, said the IFRC Secretary General Jagan Chapagain, who really, really does not want people to panic, but did point out in a very steady, calm voice that clearly the data shows a very bleak future. On current trajectories, heat waves could meet and exceed the physiological and social limits in the coming decades, including in regions I mentioned before, Sahel, North Africa, South and Southwest Asia. We warned that the impact of this would be large-scale suffering, loss of life, population movements, and a further entrenchment of inequality of outcomes. The report said extreme heat was a silent killer, that it already is claiming thousands of lives each year, is the deadliest weather-related hazard that we have. which is not a thing which is a great point, because it's not a thing you think of when you think of climate or heat or nature, climate or nature involved deaths. Heat isn't the one that sort of jumps to the forefront, unless you spent a summer in the Central Valley of Northern California, in which case you're like, oh yeah, this is what kills people.
Well, you talk about the dry heat, right? In Central Valley, it's got a dry heat, but then with all the agriculture, you've got the irrigation, and suddenly you've got humidity, and it's like, wait a minute.
According to the study cited by within this report, number of poor people living below poverty level in the world in extreme heat conditions in urban areas is going to jump by 700% by the year 2050. Now, that's not because of population growth. That's a little extreme for that, or everybody moving to the urban areas in these areas. This is increased heat waves. Projected future death rates from extreme heat are staggeringly high, comparable in magnitude by the end of the century to all cancers or all infectious diseases combined. It also points out, and I don't know that this necessarily matters, that farmers, children, the elderly, pregnant, and breastfeeding women are at higher risk of illness and death, according to the report. So within those countries that may not have the resources to combat, there are also people at the probably less economically advantaged positions within those societies themselves who will also be therefore more impacted.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it also, final note, says that our humanitarian system is not equipped to handle crisis of this scale.
Well, we've already seen that our humanitarian system, our public health system, it just was destroyed by the pandemic, just globally, not able to handle it. Yeah. So without any changes, it's not going to be able to deal with what's coming related to these future heat-related, disease-related, population, immigration, emigration related. Like there's just so many aspects of it that are going to be affecting things. It makes me think like people keep trumpeting the idea. We're living in the most peaceful time in history. We're living in the most economically advantaged time in history. The most people are currently able to eat and have things and live at higher economic levels. And it's like, great, but it's reminding me of that old saying that when you're in a good period, like in a relationship, your relationship's great. Maybe that's when you should work on the things to make sure that when it breaks down, it's just not going to just crumble. Right. So, okay.
You set up a savings account when you have a well-paying job. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that's not what we're doing right now. No. And yeah.
No, there's this is off to the side a little bit, but I was talking about whether or not they should rebuild Florida a little bit last week. There's this intriguing thing that I was reading that was explaining there is sort of a problem in that we have the National Flood Insurance. It creates building standards. So to rebuild in areas that were hit by storms, some of those buildings might have been built 40, 50, 60, 80 years ago that have been destroyed. And so there's a new building standard that if you are going to rebuild in those areas that have been hit, you have to build it to this new standard. But the story pointed out that the new standard is based on this old storm before the storm that actually wiped everything out. So like, for instance, they're like the levees that got rebuilt after Katrina in New Orleans were rebuilt to a higher standard that maybe wouldn't have handled Katrina because they were built on the storm previous to right. So the things that are already in place, that work that we're doing, when the savings account that we're putting money into while we have this job, are for a different standard of living than the one we are now trying to live.
Right. So. We're not taking inflation into account.
Yeah, exactly. Yikes.
Oh, dear. Well, in the meantime, with climate change and all those lovely mosquitoes and other things that are moving around thanks to that. Don't we have any way that we can protect ourselves, Blair?
Oh, yeah. Do you like my new ring?
What?
Look at it.
It's a pretty ring.
No, it's just string, but pretend it's a ring. Imagine if I had a ring that was a bug repellent. This may be the future. This is a preliminary study from Martin Luther Universität Wittenberg. And this is looking at 3D printings and active ingredients that are mosquito repellents currently to make wearable repellent that is not a spray or a lotion. It could be a ring or a necklace or an anklet or a bracelet. And so they used IR3535, which is an insect repellent developed by Merck. And it is known to be a more gentle repellent. It's gentle on the skin. It's been used all over the world for many years. And so they, while it's usually applied as a spray or lotion and offers several hours of protection, they wanted to find a way to release the agent over a much longer period of time, like in a ring or a bracelet. They inserted the insect repellent into a biodegradable polymer, and they shaped it in various ways. So the idea is that it would continuously evaporate and form a barrier for insects around where you're wearing that item. The rate at which the insect repellent evaporates would depend on temperature, concentration, structure, all these things. But based on the various experiments and simulations they did here, they predicted that it would take over a week for the repellent to evaporate completely at a temperature of 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit body temperature. Right. So obviously, if it's hotter, if it's more humid, if any other number of things are going on, if you're sweating more, maybe this could be a different wear time. There could be other kind of factors included here. These were all prototypes. And so the next step of the research is to determine how well the rings function under actual wearing conditions. So to put these on people and see how it actually works out. I'm curious if you'd need 10 little rings, if you need like a dog collar, like I pictured like a flea collar, but for a human, right? You'd wear that around your neck.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious. I'm also curious if like you would weave this into a one of those mesh insect repelling suits that you would wear that for when you like go into the rainforest and you're doing research and you're wearing just basically a mesh. It almost looks like a mesh range suit. If you could weave repellent into the fibers of that to time release over a long period of time, that would be super helpful. Put it in a hat. There's lots of different ways you could do this that would be really beneficial to where you wouldn't have to reapply every couple hours via a spray. So I think it's a pretty cool
I
start.
know there are bracelets and other repellent devices that you can wear, or little clips you put on your backpack and there are these kinds of repellent things, but I think the big aspect of this one is that it's biodegradable, so that over time it not only is time releasing, so it's a fairly constant, consistent amount of repellent over time, as opposed to a decreasing amount over time. You don't have to throw it out,
right?
Or if you do, it's going to just disintegrate, and it's not going to harm the environment, which I think is awesome, because there's too many those little rubber bracelets already.
Yes. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, so I think that's it too, is that by it being biodegradable, it lasts longer in its time release fashion. And like you mentioned, it's kind of a consistent release. So it's not like with a flea collar, if you put that on your dog, the concentration is highest when you first put it on, because it's basically just a treated piece of plastic or leather. And so it's just however long the repellent can stay in that thing, and it has diminishing returns over time as it's released, just like an air freshener in your car. It has diminishing returns, and eventually it's all out of that chemical. So I think this is an awesome way to also get people to wear insect repellent more, because it's just like with sunscreen, right? You put it on once and then you kind of forget about it.
Right. You don't reapply necessarily, or it's too greasy, or you have all these excuses not to. Yeah.
Right. Not to mention that it's probably way easier once this could get a streamlined production to get to all parts of the world where you're not transporting liquid, which is way harder to do where you're using it constantly. It runs out quickly. If you could send rings and bracelets all over the world that would last weeks, each of them, that would be a huge benefit to countries where things like malaria are a huge problem. So I do think it has global health potential implications as well. I think this is something we're going to see really soon, and I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, not so much. I mean, bed nets, for sleeping, and
weave it into the net.
Weave it into the net, right? You have these fibers. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But why even weave it into anything? Like, if you could just wear it, you could do like a pacifier that's got the little clip-on attached, so that the kid. Everything is kid related right now for me.
They drop everything. Yes.
Right. So you put the bink on one end, you attach it, and then the other end clips onto the clothes. So when it pops out of the mouth, it doesn't fall on the ground. It just hangs. You could just have it like or backpack bling for the older, if you got older kids.
Yeah.
Right? You wouldn't actually even need to wear it. You just have it on you. Yeah, my question is it going to smell like one of those new flea collars? Those things kind of...
I have no idea what IR 3535 smells like. I mean,
I'm going to guess it's going to smell like insect repellent for sure.
Or DEET or Skin So Soft.
Yeah.
Which is it? I don't know. Skin So Soft at least smells a little better. I have no idea.
I've never used any of these things, but I'm one of those people that mosquitoes don't like.
Oh,
if you went to the rainforest, you'd probably still get some light.
Oh yeah, if I was in one of those high intensity areas. But I do want to test. Like if you have like 5 people, and 2 of them are wearing the repellent ring or whatever.
But how does it affect other people that they're with? How far does the
density, or do they get a little bit of side protection?
That's exactly what they got to figure out. How much do you gotta wear? Where do you gotta wear it? How long does it last? All that good stuff. Absolutely.
Let's get it.
Yeah.
Let's get it. All right. Well, speaking of those bugs that you can't get away from, what about the ones on our teeth? Yeah, you know it. And you know how every once in a while you don't brush your teeth soon enough and your teeth get like that, like they're wearing socks.
Yeah.
Your tooth sweaters, tooth socks.
That protective layer.
Yeah, it's not a protective layer. It's buildup of, we talk about it as being bacteria in our mouth that is feeding on the sugars on the surface of our teeth. It's eating away at the dentin that protects the enamel that protects the teeth.
Some are.
Yeah, get to the cavities underneath. Well, a researcher from the University of Pennsylvania decided to take a look at the species of bacteria that were causing aggressive toddler tooth decay. So this one is especially for you, Justin, as your child
that's not fair. They just got the teeth.
They're temporary anyway. They're trial.
Yeah, they're temporary, but they're going to be. They're new.
I know, and then like my mom got in trouble once upon a time. I ended up with silver tooth right in front of my face because she gave me a bottle of apple juice. People don't know all the things, and toddler teeth. They take a lot of damage. But what is going on the surface of those teeth, and what exactly is happening to make tooth decay in toddlers so especially aggressive sometimes? Well, this researcher found 2 types of microbes, not just little bacteria, but also a fungus. And together, Streptococcus mutans and Candida albicans work together as a superorganism. Where normally the bacteria is unable to move around very much by itself and would just kind of sit around by itself. When Candida is present in the mouth, the fungus sends out feelers. It has legs that spread out over the teeth, and the bacteria is then able to hitch a ride and take a trip other places it's unable to. And so this ability of moving and spreading across the teeth that the Streptococcus mutans would normally not have, it now does. So together, it leads to a much more aggressive damage to teeth. Both the fungus and the bacteria are doing their work, but together it's like bad Voltron. Bad Voltron.
For those kids today who or even adults perhaps who don't know what Voltron is,
sorry,
because I think that was from the 1980s.
80s, yeah.
It's like a bunch of individual. It's like Power Rangers.
It's like Power Rangers. I was gonna say it was like Power Rangers that came
for those kids today who don't know what a Power Ranger is.
And all form the head.
Can somebody get us a 8-year-old who can bridge a couple of these? See what the new combined forces superhero thing is.
Yeah. So anyway, the researchers said, they've seen fungi and bacteria working together before. This is not like completely unfounded, but the way that it's happening is really interesting, because what it's allowing the bacteria to do is create these biofilms on the surface of the teeth that it wouldn't ordinarily be able to create. And biofilms, we know, are harder to get rid of than just small colonies of bacteria. So because it's a biofilm, it's much stronger, it's resistant to brushing, it's resistant to flossing, and even mouthwash that we might use. And so you don't want the biofilm to get started. Together, these two things are doing that. But also, on top of it, it's now potentially going to give us a new direction to start looking at these dynamic fungal bacterial interactions, how they create these what they're calling biofilm superstructures, and how maybe if we can keep them from binding together, if we can keep Voltron from forming, if we can keep the Power Rangers from, what do? They ranger together? I don't even know what those guys. They're all different colors.
They call it Voltroning too. They're
Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, I know, is part of the deal.
They're not allowed.
Hey, let's Voltron together.
If we can keep them from morphing mightily, then we might be able to prevent more cavities, which is better for toddler teeth and for your teeth as well. And potentially for your heart disease, for cardiovascular wellness, and all sorts of other downstream effects that impact human health.
I just got inundated by messages from 8-year-olds. They say it's it's like promoting the solo careers of the members of One Direction, whatever that is.
One Direction. Oh my gosh! Isn't that what his name?
20-year-olds, right? It's not even 8-year-olds anymore.
Who's the one guy from One Direction?
It doesn't matter.
Harry Styles.
So yes, Harry Styles. He's got a great career. Somebody made sure he could not.
No more Voltroning for him.
No directioning. He's just one.
So does this mean we need antifungal toothpaste?
Not necessarily antifungal toothpaste, because fungi are part of the microbial populations that are part of our overall health and everything. It's just when
so
these
is the bacteria, and then we're like saying we want to brush our teeth all the time to get rid of them.
But maybe there will be some kind of treatment that can be given at early dental appointments that are a wash that the dentist puts on the teeth. Maybe there is something that just specifically targets the interaction between these organisms to keep them from Voltroning.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't like the toothpastes. I mean, I know that the antibacterial in the toothpaste has been shown to reduce heart disease, but I just have an issue with the broad spectrum antimicrobial in my toothpaste, and I don't use that toothpaste. I can't do it.
And I have the disclaimer real quick. All of the dental
eat yogurt.
All the dental heart disease connections have been disputed by people who study heart disease. The only ones who still think that's a real science and promote it constantly are toothpaste companies. If you try to Google the connection between heart disease,
I'm not going to do it right now, but I hope that somebody Googles it by the after show.
All kinds of information from the manufacturers of toothpaste, and if you look hard enough, you'll find what is American Heart Association, whatever it is, and no, not really.
All right, so we might not have an antifungal toothpaste, but should we be eating potatoes?
So, first of all, maybe we do have an antifungal toothpaste now.
Ooh, okay.
Thanks to potatoes.
Ooh.
Like that.
Thank you, potatoes.
So, with all the growing threats, climate change is sending our way. It's easy to forget the other big problems that we have. Antimicrobial resistance is on the rise as well. Some estimates have suggested that we might run out of viable antibiotics and antifungals within a few decades, which would make things like paper cuts and minor scratches life-threatening occurrences, as they were in the days before antibiotics were discovered. If that happens, simple infections could claim more lives than all other causes combined. So, researchers have been searching for new compounds to countermeasure everything, all these infections. This week in MBio, a multinational team of researchers in Europe report the discovery of a new antifungal antibiotic named solanamycin, a compound made by a bacteria that infects potatoes.
Aha, there we are.
The compound, initially isolated from the pathogenic bacterium that infects potatoes, appears to be produced actually by a broad spectrum of related plant pathogenic bacteria. These bacteria are attacking potatoes underground, where their fiercest competitors are fungi and other bacteria.
Fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So soil microbes currently already produce most of our therapeutic antibiotics. The soil is a battleground of fungi and bacteria fighting against each other, fungi fighting fungi, bacteria. It's a bacteria world underground. And there's been an arms race.
I need Pat Benatar in here right now. Soil is a battlefield.
It is. It is, and it's been going on for 1 billion years, and they've gotten really good at working out niches, who can go where, how to fight this versus that. The whole thing's been going on. The experiment of soil has been going on for a very long time. So solanamycin acts against a wide range of fungi, also known to infect and wreak havoc on agricultural crops and potatoes, according to the researchers, making it an ideal candidate for crop antifungal uses. And in lab studies, the compound also acted against Candida albicans.
Oh, there we are. Woohoo.
A fungus that occurs naturally in the mouth, we know.
Yes. We just talked about
can
that.
help bacteria move around and form all kinds of problems in the mouth. Okay, so the results then suggest solanamycin and related compounds could be useful for both agricultural and clinical settings, as well as now, thanks to the other story, for dental mouthwash. Once in a while.
Not all the time,
at the dentist.
yeah.
So what I'm hearing is I should suck on a potato. Is that correct?
One that's been infected with a pathogen.
Got it. Okay.
Go suck on a sick potato. That just sounds not nice.
What you need to fix your teeth.
No, I'm telling you, I want your mouth to be healthy. Duh.
The new discovery suggests plant-based microorganisms are worth a closer look.
Yeah.
Especially as crops develop some resistance to our existing treatments, as well as for humans who are, or for the microbes that are becoming resistant to the ones that we use to protect humans. So according to Rita Monson, University of Cambridge, who co-led the study. And it was actually identified 15 years ago at Cambridge in a bacterium Dickia solani. which produces the compound. And they knew it had some antimicrobial effect, but they weren't sure because there's a bunch, there's always a bunch of compounds that are being produced. So they knocked out the one that they knew had an antimicrobial effect, and they found it was still killing other microbes and fungi. It was still having it. So they realized they actually have a spectrum of compounds that are doing this work. And one of the interesting things I thought from this was that it releases this at the pH of a potato, which is around 6. So it doesn't just, it waits until it's even in the right environment, which is so like, this is using an antibiotic only when you're really sick, only when you really need it. Because if it's outside and it's just always putting this antifungal out there, the fungus can have plenty of opportunity. The fungus
would have gotten used to it, right?
Evolved
to be mutated. Right.
So the pH levels of the potato, as well as requiring a cell density of the thing it wants to attack to be near as well. It needs both of those to be in place. Then it releases it. It hits the target when it gets close and when it's in the right environment, and doesn't do it the rest of the time, which is a brilliant strategy for prolonging that tool in the toolbox, that weapon that doesn't then need to be redesigned. And it's something humans need to learn from this potato pathogen when we attack disease. So,
to be as smart as a potato,
and the pH,
so smart.
The pH in a potato is only slightly lower than that of a mouth. So we're not too far away from being able to just suck on a pathogenic infected potato to get the effects. But no, these are going to be isolated compounds that will have nothing to do with infected potatoes by the time it becomes market. But they're going to study this both on crops and for clinical use and human as well.
I mean, if we can have something that can fight these multi-drug resistant pathogens, that's, wonderful. And if we can use the knowledge of how the potato uses it so sparingly in the actual design of the antibiotics that come from this knowledge, can we create an antibiotic that itself is only triggered in a very specific situation? So even if your doctor gives you the antibiotic when it's not necessary, the antibiotic doesn't actually, it won't work, right? So is there some way that we can make it triggered by the infection, by the specific pathogen, by, whatever environmental conditions are present in the body at a certain point in time? That would be...
Yeah, that's the $1 million idea right there.
Yeah.
So even if you get prescribed it or you take it too long or whatever, like you pull your old antibiotics out of the cabinet a couple years later because you feel like maybe you're getting sick, and then you take it and they go, oh, no.
Oh, no.
And the other aspect of this too is that this is something that infects potatoes. It's bad for the potato. It kills off the potatoes or makes them terrible. So, but to do so, it has to fight off all of the competition.
Yep.
So there you go. You just don't, you're not putting in a potato, but it's still going to attack all the competition with those compounds. Sort of thinking then allows you to create the compound and apply it to potatoes to kill off everything else, but maybe the one thing. And then you have a much narrower
spectrum. Yeah.
I love it.
Well, I like knowing that there might be hope in the future for our antibacterial resistance that is becoming more and more of a problem. Something else that's becoming, it's not supposed to be a problem, but robots, they're supposed to be helping us at work, and more often workplaces are bringing in robots that are supposed to be making work life more effective, more efficient, manufacturing, your business, whatever it happens to be. But how do people really feel about these robots being brought into the workplace? New research report just published: the rise of robots increases job insecurity and maladaptive workplace behaviors. So I'm just going to read from the abstract on this one because it is just, I kind of go, well, yeah, duh, okay. So, so there hasn't been a lot of research assessing how people in the workplace react to robots coming into their workplaces. And so they drew from an appraisal of stress, and they found that employees exposed to robots reported greater job insecurity. These people in Singapore had, and also in India, and an online experiment, they found that increased exposure to robots increased job insecurity. The robot-related job insecurity leads to worker burnout and workplace incivility. So people start lashing out at their coworkers and their managers and are just not as nice anymore because everybody's like, I'm going to get fired for, not being nice to the robot. The robot's going to do a better job than I am. And also, to turn this around, they have concluded that self-affirmation should be taken by the workers to buffer those negative effects of the job insecurity. So just for those of you out there, science says that if you have robots being brought into your workplace, don't get mad at the robots. Just tell yourself, I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And gosh darn it.
Yeah.
Robots like me.
Okay.
The Stuart Smalley advice, so it's good. One thing that I, having worked with robots,
yes,
in a lab setting, one thing I found that did mitigate all that sort of ill will towards the robots or coworkers or something is you put giant googly eyes somewhere on that robot.
Yeah. You can't take them seriously.
Name them, and then name them, and they don't seem as threatening. Although there's always, I've seen it too. There's always that moment where you're like, "Wow, this new robot's really amazing. It's got this high throughput. It can do all of these things at once." And then you sort of watch the slow recognition as a bunch of scientists with years of study and work in the lab kind of realize he's like, "Oh, that's my job."
Yeah,
but that's why I'm here.
But see, the other piece of this, I think, is what we were talking about when we were discussing futurism a few weeks ago with our guest. And that's that my fear with robots in the workplace is that they will take the things that I need to do, which is fine, but then I will be asked to do more. It's that whole idea that automation and robots and like technology and the internet and all these things should have been turning our work week shorter and shorter, but it's actually making it longer and expecting more of us. So like I think there is also people who've been in a field for decades who have seen this kind of move of automation and technology and how that's actually made their job more demanding over time.
Oh, of course.
And I think that's the other piece of this. It's not just this robot's going to take my job. It's this robot's going to make my job easier, and therefore more will be expected of me than should be.
They took our jobs.
So
yes.
Just give us all a 20-hour work week, please. We're doing way more than we did with a 40-hour week even 20 years ago.
So true.
Let us
true.
Work less. We'll spend the money in the economy. You know we will.
Yeah, but there is a part of me also that from the side of the corporate nature of jobs, and it's a little disturbing. I'm wondering, the 1984 kind of aspect of it in the future, like you will make self-affirmations and your job is fine and everything is good. There's Very interesting.
We
Interesting
usually
implications
avoid
for the future of work. As
Yeah, you
well.
know who can affirm your job? Your boss.
Your boss.
Your boss can also affirm your job and say, you are not being replaced.
I know.
usually avoid mentioning things that I heard about from the news. But I found out there's this thing called quiet quitting,
Yes.
which sounds like a bunch of people coming to work and then not doing their job until they get found out and
That
get
is not what
fired.
it is.
That's
But
not
that's
what
not
it is
what it
at
is.
all. No,
What it was
Yep.
people who come to work and do their job
but just
during
their
the
job.
hours that they were asked to be at work.
Yes, and only their job.
And only
Mhm.
their
But-
job.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
but that's what a job's supposed to be.
Yes.
It is.
And
In
I would-
other
I would
cultures,
point
they
out-
call that working to rule, as in working to the rule of your job script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would point out that's all robots are capable of.
That's also true. The robots cannot plan Janice's birthday party,
No.
can they?
No, they won't.
cannot.
No.
They won't,
They will
and they
not do
won't
it.
if you don't assign them work, they won't do anything.
Yeah.
They're not gonna like, hey, we got.
But if you
downtime,
give them
I'm
extra
gonna go and-
hours, they're not going to complain either. So they're like, oh, you want me to work?
neither do a lot of work.
Yeah, they're not in a union. They don't get overtime.
Yeah, but
Yet anyway.
It's overtime.
What's overtime? This show is not in it. I hope that you are enjoying all our time together. This is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us for another fun-filled, science-filled episode of our program. If you want to help support This Week in Science, please head over to TWIS.org and click on our Patreon link. We are listener supported. $10 and more per month, and we will thank you by name at the end of the show. And depending on your level of support, there are other things that get sent to you, like stickers or T-shirts and other little bits and doodads. But you've got to join us on Patreon to be able to find out all there is in the world of TWIS. But regardless, you are who keep us going. You are our supporters, and we thank you so much because we really can't do this without you. Coming back to more This Week in Science, do you know what time it is? It's time for that part of the show where Blair talks about animals, and it better be animals this time, Blair, or I don't know what I'll do. Anyway, it's time for Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
Oh my gosh. I have a story about eye spots, the type of camouflage.
Yeah. I talked about that. I talked about that a couple weeks ago. There's something about eye spots.
Yeah, you did. I was off sick, but you know what? I was watching.
Oh,
And there is a study this week about eye spots and how they are effective at changing the behavior of predators. Here, let me demonstrate real quick.
But mine said
Sorry
the
if you're listening.
my study found the opposite.
Oh, Blair just put sunglasses on the back of her head.
Don't attack her now while she's looking. You gotta wait till she
I
turns her head.
see. It's cousin eye spots.
That was very effective camouflage.
So if you came up on me from
Swim
behind
goggles on backwards,
and you saw my
Very
swim
effective.
goggles on the back of my head, you might think I was looking that way and not want to attack me, right? Well, so this study that Justin reported on a few weeks ago, this was published on September 14th, said that overall, the best camouflage was masquerade camouflage. So that's where it looked like you were a part of the habitat you lived in, or you looked like something that a predator might not be
like
interested
a leaf or a
Like a leaf
rock
or a stick.
or
Yeah. Absolutely. Background matching and disruptive coloration. So background matching is just like being a similar color to where you live. And disruptive coloration is when you have stripes or spots or something to break up your body shape. Those did not differ from each other. And they also had some benefits, but not as much as the masquerade camouflage. Motion camouflage had kind of limited success, and there was no evidence that eye spots had any impact on the measures that they used in this
Purely
study in September,
decorative.
which was attack rate and search time of predators.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing. Those are very specific measures related to predation. And in fact, most theories about eye spots have nothing to do with search time or attack rate. In fact, a lot of the time, eye spots are located on a part of the body to lure predators to bite that area as opposed to a vital area of the body.
Interesting.
So attack rate and search time would have nothing to do with those things. You'd have to look at mortality rates, right? And so this is part of the reason that you want to make sure that when you're looking at a kind of cross-referencing comprehensive study of studies, if you're looking at very specific measures, there might be other things that you need to look at that are not being considered, right? So this is something that if you're looking purely at predation rates, who died when, who got eaten when, you might have found different measures than you did in this other study. So brings me to this study, which came out today on October 12th. This was looking at the different kinds of eye spots and how eye spots could be beneficial to prey. Fish, butterflies, moths, praying mantids, beetles, they all have these circular markings on their bodies that we think look like eyes. This is the initial piece of this study is, do they in fact look like eyes?
Oh, that's a great question.
Because right now we're showing some kind of a butterfly or a moth. I'm not sure what that is that's up on the screen. And it does, like, if you look at it, you're like, oh, if I squint my eyes, it kind of looks like a couple of deer eyes or maybe two deer.
Tiger eyes.
Right.
Tiger
But the top ones.
Owl eyes.
Owl eyes.
But the thing is, they look nothing like a moth or butterfly eyes.
Right. So they're not trying to look like butterfly eyes. But so what we already know, as I mentioned, is that these eye spots can deflect a predator's attention to prey's non-vital body parts, like their tail as opposed to their head. They can also potentially intimidate from attacking at all. And so this was the thing that maybe was contradicted in this other study, was that the attack rate in this other study appeared to be the same as other prey items that didn't have eye spots. But in this case, anecdotally, there are observations in the wild where animals with eye spots versus animals that are not, well, the predator will come up, size them up, and walk away, right? And so before we go looking at whether that's a bunch of baloney or not, I want to go into the actual research that was done here, because they did do some experimentation that I think is really interesting. So this is all based on the idea that you can test A, if they're being construed as eyes, and B, if they're effective deterrents, by watching how animals respond based on the way that the eyes look like they're looking. So this is the theory that the best eye spots would follow you wherever you go, if this is the case. Be like the Mona Lisa. The better you walk around the room, they appear to maintain eye contact with you, and therefore, whether you move left or right, you are still inside of this big predator, and so you're not going to try to attack anywhere near that predator. However, in the experiment, if the eye spots were displaced either to the left or the right, so these eyes looked like they were looking one way or the other, they would protect prey from predators approaching in that direction. So you wouldn't want to go at them from the left if they're from the right, if they're looking to their left, right?
Right.
Anyway, so the directionality of the potential pupils, if they are being construed as eyes, would matter. If they're not, if they're just big circles and they're just like looking weird and they disrupt their body shape, then it wouldn't matter. So what they did is they took chicks and they pitted them against artificial moths. So those artificial moths.
Classic experiment. Classic.
Mealworms with paper triangles pinned to them. The paper triangles had eye spots on them, either looking straight forward, so they could follow the chick wherever they went, or with the center circle nudged to the right or the left, so they were looking to the right or the left. And then all of the prey were designed to be equally conspicuous to predators. They could tell there were mealworms in there. They were interested. Then they made 3 miniature catwalks, or as they call them, chick walks, to lead the chicks towards the moth. One led directly towards them. The 2 others directed the chicks to approach from either the left or the right. They timed how long it took the chick to approach each type of moth from each direction. And what they found was they were very slow to approach from the left when the eye spots were shifted left. They were slow to approach from the right when the eye spots were shifted right. When they approached from the opposite direction of the way the eyes were looking, they went very quickly and ate the mealworm right away. And when the eye spots were straight forward, so it looked like they were going everywhere, they were slow to approach from all 3 directions. So that really seems like the chicks perceived them as eyes, and that they were most effective when the eyes were gazing at the potential predator. So at least in the case of these chicks, they were eyes, and they were intimidating.
Well, chicks, they are little predators, but they're baby predators that are picked off by bigger predators all the time. So this would be a very important stimuli for them. Really important contextual cue, potentially.
Yeah. So statistically speaking, is this, in the big bad world of camouflage, is it extremely effective? I don't know.
Did the mealworms still get eaten?
Yes, they did.
All righty then.
But yeah, so that's really the question, right? Is it enough of a hesitation to increase survivability? That's the name of the game. So
I would say, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, based on the statistics, it is a significant enough difference that it would impact survivability.
Maybe in one of the scenarios, the chicks attacked faster
because they were looking away. But so in nature, eye spots are pretty much always looking the Mona Lisa way. So that's why they tested it this way, is to see if they were actually eyes, if they were being perceived as eyes. In nature, they all have this straightforward gaze.
So the point that I made at the previous version of this camouflage study is, in that study, they had looked at all these prey species versus a slew of different predators because they were doing meta studies.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what was a predator in one was prey in the next study, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I kind of point out then, and I'll point out again here, is I have a feeling that it's the eye spots, for instance, or certain types of camouflage might be more effective against certain predators.
Mm-hmm.
So chicks may have eaten every mealworm. And so the eye spots, there's a little hesitation to approach maybe, but still they all got eaten.
There's a difference, Justin, though. But they were pinned. You have to remember they were pinned.
I get it. I get it. But I'm just, as an example, if we just assume that everything's like, but then there's like a type of field mouse that sees it and goes, it's looking at me, and runs away. Like it might be very predator specific to that element of a camouflage that's allowed it to persist and has made it part of the arsenal of camouflage, even though the rooster that's passing by never gets fooled, right? Never hesitates.
Well, and that's what I was going to mention about this meta-analysis that you had last month, is that it could work extremely well for one species against one species, right?
Yes.
But statistically, in the entire world of predator and prey, it could not be a statistically significant amount. But to that species, you can bet it might be significant, right?
Yeah. And it
so
could
that's
be
where those meta-analyses get into issues, because you're not weighting kind of the importance for specific groups.
And there's a chance that there was a very long time period when the back of the eyes moth was getting predated on a bird that it totally worked on. And that's why there's so many of these eye camouflage moths or whatever that are out there.
Sure.
But that bird, it ran out of moths to eat, so now it eats something else. And the new predators aren't fooled by it. So it could also look ineffective because it could be an archaic thing that worked against a predator that it was in close proximity. I mean, there's all sorts of...
But
There
that
are
wouldn't work
multiple,
if it
right.
called attention to them. That is the problem,
Right.
right? So if it called attention to them now and it was a holdover from the past,
They
it
just all
would
get
go away
eaten.
very fast. Yes.
Yeah.
That's why
so
you don't see any neon-colored butterflies anymore.
You actually
they were
do, because it
beautiful.
signifies poison. Anyway,
There's
the
poison
thing about
butterfly.
this-
Wait,
Yes.
pause the show.
Yes.
Pause
What?
the show just for a second.
Toxic.
There
yes.
are poison butterflies?
Yes,
Yes.
most of them.
What?
That's why you have the monarch copies.
Yes.
The ones that they want to look like monarchs because the monarchs have the milkweed that makes them toxic and they taste bad.
They
and so
taste
everybody
bad,
wants,
okay,
and so
but-
the birds eat them and they spit them out, and everybody wants to look like the monarch so
okay,
they don't get bitten and
is
spit
there a
out.
butterfly that can get eaten and then it kills something?
Well, not a human, but yes.
No, not a
Yes,
human, but
yes.
there
Anyway,
is. Okay, I
okay.
didn't know that.
Butterfly.
I get the bad taste thing, but
The-
that's
pretty.
The last thing I
After
want to
the
say about
fact.
this,
You already
this
got
study,
it.
before we move on to the rest of the corner, is that the reason I love this study so much, and the thing I think that is so important about this, is that they found a way to test animal perception to figure out if they thought the eye spots were eyes or not. And it is
Mhm.
great to be able to figure that out, to also challenge our own perspective. Go, just because we think they look like eyes, that does not mean that other animals think they look like eyes. Test that and confirm it. I love it. I think it's a really cool study design and a really good reminder of why we do studies like this.
Yeah, and I think the data really, plays it out. Really does show that they are looking at these dots in circles as if they are looking in a particular direction, and that affected their behavior. And so
it's actually oddly,
be
it's actually
interesting.
Charlie in the chat room is pointing out. Also, my strategy for making robots friendlier in the workplace. Just googly eyes.
yes, googly eyes. I love it.
Very nice. Next, I have a quick story about animal trafficking, and I know it's not a fun thing to talk about. Don't worry, I have a fun stinger for the end of the corner. I'll bring us back up. But
Just a
Before
little
then-
sandwich. We got a little
before-
serious sandwich.
yes, before then, I have to address the fact that global demand for exotic pets is on the rise, partially because online marketplaces make trading of exotic and illegal pets easier, and partly because of social media. As someone who follows many animal accounts on various social media types of things, as you might expect, the number of accounts that I have to unfollow because they are joyfully showing off their pet bush baby or their pet, just any sort of slow lorises, otters, wild cats, there's parrots, there's so many things that there's so many animals that are trafficked to be cute animals for social media fodder. And I know that in most cases those stories don't end well because they do not make good pets. They are wild animals. But also the process to bring them into the United States and other wealthy countries that take exotic animals as pets is a bad one. For that one exotic animal that you see that is someone's pet, there could be 10 or 20 that died in transit because they were being smuggled into the country. Not to mention, you have removed that animal from the wild where they could be contributing to the genetic biodiversity of an area, and it ruins kind of the whole ecosystem every time you take a breeding individual out of that space, especially if they're an endangered species. So this was an article released in The Conversation this week, and it was looking at a decade of wild harvested live vertebrate animals entering the United States. Most of them were headed for the pet trade, and they found 3.6 times the number of unlisted species compared with CITES listed species. What that means is, so CITES, I've mentioned it before on the show, it is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. It's essentially a global effort where countries come together and they discuss the listing of individual protected species of fauna and flora. And their list is about 10% of all described plants and terrestrial vertebrates, which on one side is like, oh, that's actually a lot. There's a lot of vertebrates on the planet. 10% of them are listed. That's great. But that means 90% are not being counted when they go from country to country, and 90% are not being stopped at the border when they go from country to country. Actually, less than 1% of fish invertebrates are on CITES. And so there's no international regulatory framework to monitor the trade of an unlisted species. There is only CITES. So only the things that are listed are being monitored and policed to a certain extent. So with all of that in mind, knowing that 3 times the number of unlisted species are going into the US versus listed means that luckily the United States is actually monitoring these things on our own. So we have some data, but that means that there is data missing as to where they came from and where else they are going on the planet. Most of these unlisted species go through kind of dubious movements around the world. More than a quarter of them have conservation threats, declining populations, they're threatened with extinction, they're endangered, all these sorts of things. And so this highlights the need to monitor wildlife species, all wildlife species, when they enter countries. And it also shows that more regulation is needed to prevent trade regulation or declines, so that like when there are areas where animals can come and go and be trafficked back and forth without some sort of regulation, that is how these animals get moved all over the world. But the really big thing, none of this would happen if there was not desire from wealthy countries like the United States. Usually it is less wealthy countries exporting wild animals into wealthy countries for the pet trade. And so they only do that because there is a lot of money to be made there. The reason the money is to be made...
those greedy poor people. They're the problem.
No, that's not what I said. No, they're trying to do whatever they can to get along in a world where money is disproportionately distributed. And the people in rich countries are willing to put a lot of money into receiving endangered and protected species. So first, I'm happy to see that there is some work being done looking at the trafficking of these animals and the need to list more animals in CITES. Also, the need to create a framework outside of CITES. It's not enough. The other thing is this is like the whole conversation we were having with the increase of technology and automation and all these things. Things are easier than they used to be, including buying and selling things that are illegal, including live animals. So please, before you buy a pet that is not a domesticated species, like a dog or a cat or a guinea pig, please do some research. Is it a protected species? How did this animal enter the United States? Were they smuggled in? Do they breed well in captivity? Because if they don't, guess what? They were stolen from the wild for sure. Most parrots, stolen from the wild. They don't breed well in captivity. Most exotic reptiles, stolen from the wild. So knowing that, do some research before you buy that exotic animal off the internet. And also maybe just reconsider and buy a pet that is domestic and also would be a better pet for you. Because when you buy an exotic animal as a pet, a lot of the time they end up as invasive species because people get overwhelmed. They don't make good pets because they're wild animals and they release them into the wild, but they're not from there. Also, disease transmission is a whole thing because these animals are being moved often in unsanitary conditions. They are not going through regular health checks because it is a smuggling situation. And so diseases can be transmitted from animals to people. So that's a whole thing. Also, it can threaten wild populations, of course. Like I mentioned, you're taking animals out of a functioning population when you steal these animals to be brought into the pet trade. So, all that to say, stick with your domestic animals. And if you see, this is the reason I want to talk about this. If you see these videos on social media of wild animals being treated as pets, downvote them, unfollow them. If you feel confrontational, you can write a nicely worded comment on the social media post, but do not feed that machine. Don't like that video because that is actually hurting wild animals.
Yeah, I think it's a weird fetish to want to have pets in general, but then specifically some sort of an endangered animal as ridiculous.
Don't go smearing all pets. That is a broad brush there. But anyway,
well, it is and it isn't. Like, there's that woman who got arrested recently in one of the Dakotas, I think, who brought her pet raccoon to the bar with her.
That is a wild animal. That is not a
wild
pet.
animal, not
So-
domesticated. No,
A pet.
No,
No.
but this is the exact
Nope.
conversation we're currently having. That is
Yeah.
not a domesticated
No,
species.
I know. I get
That
it.
animal
It's
has not evolved alongside humans for thousands of years.
Sure.
and
But
she
this-
might be putting that cute little raccoon on Instagram, and you can say
Mhm.
that's cute, but what Blair is asking is downvote that. Like,
Yes.
don't give it the attention, because unless it's coming from a zoo or an endangered
Wildlife
species
Rehabilitation Center.
yeah, rehabilitation
Mhm.
center or a conservation group that's trying to help these a particular species, like Blair is saying, you're doing that species damage.
Yeah.
Even raccoons, trash
Even
pandas.
raccoons.
It's
Mhm.
true.
Yes. Anyway, I would like to close out the animal corner with the results of Fat Bear Week.
I know.
They were announced today.
I love it.
I was very excited yesterday. My predicted matchup for the final of 901 versus 747 came to fruition. They were so good, but 901 could not keep up with the massive, beautiful, rotund 747.
I mean, come on, it's a 747.
The jumbo jet of a
The
bear has succeeded.
Exactly.
I love it. And they had I think before the final yesterday, they had a Fat Bear happy hour. So National Park Service individuals came on and chatted about the Brooks River and Katmai National Park in Alaska and about why Fat Bear Week is important. And that video is still up on the Fat Bear Week webpage. So you can watch that if you want, learn about Fat Bear Week and about hibernation. And they had a bunch of park rangers list their favorite bear fact, which was very cool. And you can also browse some photos and footage of 747. So
I'm done with Fat Bear Week.
He
I'm done with it. It's become too corporate. There's too much money involved.
well, it's a good thing you're done with it because it's
Scandal.
over.
There was
The
a
bracket
voting
is
scandal.
closed. Yeah, there
I
was
know,
a
but there
voting scandal. Yes,
There was some ballot stuffing that took place at one point.
No.
Also,
Who would
the-
do
the-
that?
it was
747, by the way, is also known as Coal Bear because
Coal
it's
Bear.
got one weird ear, just like the late night talk show host guy, who also talks about the bear on the show as his favorite because it's a namesake. And so now you got media, big media dollars, big corporate companies coming in and throwing their weight behind a fat bear. Is he the fattest bear? Maybe, but we'll never know because the voting's all,
Justin, we actually do know how much all these bears weigh. So if you just wanted to figure out which one was the heaviest, you could just decide.
But no, it's not about
the whole
heaviest.
point of this.
It's about the change.
It is not just about the change because you could
As well.
also just run those numbers. It is about who is the fattest by public standards.
Yeah, it's a popularity contest. That's
Yes,
all it is.
it certainly
Yes.
is. That's the
It's-
whole point.
And the whole point is to bring education to bear ecosystems and the ecosystems that they are a part of, the salmon habitat, the hibernation that these bears go through. It's a wonder. I think it is such a wonderful, creative way to bring people into the world of nature.
Yeah, see, this is a good use of social media for animals.
This is beautiful.
This is the opposite side of that conversation we were just having. It is about raising awareness about wild animals and keeping those wild animals wild. We are using cams out in the wild to be able to observe these animals and talk about their function in their ecosystem. It's perfect. I love it. Everyone gets in on it. It's fun. It's cute.
Fun.
You get to look
We
at
like
little
fun.
bear ears.
And
So
then
good.
the
All
bear
right.
chunks.
Here.
You get to look at the bear chunks, and we do love the bear chunks. Hey, you know what we also love? We love it when you head over to the This Week in Science Zazzle store and take a look at our merchandise. I mean, there's fat bears out there, but there's also TWIS t-shirts and hats and pillows and all sorts of wonderful gifts even that you could get your favorite person for the holidays that are coming up. They are coming. And you know, everything that you purchase over on the This Week in Science Zazzle store does help support TWIS. So your purchases are going to support a great effort, our podcast. This is This Week in Science. And Justin, are you going to tell me about how to tell the future right now?
Yes, of course. So it has been said somewhere by somebody at some point, maybe, that many animals know when an earthquake is about to strike.
But how?
Worms, for instance, can tell precisely when an earthquake will happen, down to the hour, days, or even in some cases weeks in advance. They just don't bother doing anything about it or telling anyone because it's really no big deal to them. It doesn't affect them at all. Two stories this week on the topic of earthquake precognition in humans, to whom earthquakes are a really big deal. The ability that some scientists claim and perhaps have been proven to have that allows them to tell when an earthquake is going to happen before it happens with their minds and some applied science.
What?
First, researchers at Stellar Solutions, a systems engineering services company studying intermediate and large-sized earthquakes in California, have discovered detectable changes in local magnetic fields that occur 2 to 3 days before an earthquake. In their study published in the journal Geophysical Research, Solid Earth, the Quake Finder team found that the signal of the magnetic field changes faintly but statistically significantly enough ahead of an earthquake. And seismologists hope that this technique can be refined and eventually be used as a forecasting tool. So they did this in collaboration with Google Accelerated Science Team. Scientists tapped into magnetic fields from an array of magnetometers at 125 different sensor stations along major faults in California. They gathered data from 2005 to 2019. That's quite a long time, at which time they got 19 earthquakes of over 4.5 on the faults that they were studying. They're a multi-station team, their multi-station analysis, having all these sensors in very disparate areas, allowed them to separate noise that could affect the magnetometers. Things like rush hour traffic could show up there as blips. Irish dance festivals might even show up. Solar activity has an effect on the readings. So after training algorithms on half of the data sets, the researchers identified a signal indicating changes in the magnetic field between 72 and 24 hours before the earthquakes. So a potential prognostication tool for earthquakes, something that we have not had in the past. So that's good. And in a paper in Geophysical Research Letters, researchers at Los Alamos National Laboratory find that using deep learning AI to interpret the acoustic sounds a fault makes can also be used to make future predictions. So in their lab, they have been recording the sounds that faults make when they shift, and they developed an algorithm of applied machine learning to the data to demonstrate that the fault emissions within the waveform and the sound and acoustics of the fault slippages is imprinted the information regarding the current state where it is in a slip cycle in real time. So previously they've been able to tell where along the slippage the quake is at any given time, or where the fault is at any given time. Now they have so much data that they've been able to analyze it. And the way they put it is almost like putting it into a translation tool, where it sort of finishes your sentence as you're writing, in like a word processor or something. I guess this would be
right. Predictive speech.
Predictive speech predicts the next thing, so you can just and they think they can now use this to tell the future of the fault. Now, it only works in the Pajarito fault system, as that is where the entire data set is coming from. Though still not bad place to start, because this Pajarito fault system runs directly under the Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Oh, yikes. Yeah.
Where nuclear materials storage facility may be sitting directly over an active and little understood fault, believed to be capable of a 6.5 magnitude earthquake. And of course, if you familiar at all, Los Alamos National Laboratory was built before they realized that they had us on a fault line. And so it was originally not built to withstand massive earthquakes.
I'm sure they've done retrofitting, but still.
Well,
this is it's good to know how long do we have? Can we predict an earthquake? Is a big one coming? Yes. And do they have time to get everybody out, or time to make certain security adjustments?
Yeah, and can they retrofit a plutonium containment area facility so that nothing? So hopefully this is the last time you will ever hear this mentioned.
Ever.
We built a nuclear facility on top of a fault line. But there are two predictions now, prediction methods for earthquakes. So when we tell people, hey, there's an earthquake coming, they can take action, like as if a hurricane or a major climate crisis was looming, and, react in time.
I'm just thinking about what you would do if you were told there was an earthquake coming, because you're not supposed to stand in the doorway anymore. So I guess you'd get under a table, and then you just sit there and wait and just get more and more anxious.
Oh, gosh, Blair. You leave town!
In 30 seconds?
Town.
Well, you don't have that much time.
How much time do you have? So,
the electromagnetic one was 24 to 72 hours.
That one is the one that I think is going to be significantly useful.
And the acoustic one, they didn't say how far, but it was into the future. They would be able to predict where and when the next slippage was going to happen, because
they can triangulate these signals. I'm sure.
Well, no, the Los Alamos one, based on the audio, thus far they had been able to tell where it was in a slipping event in real time, but because they have so much data on that fault, they now can translate the early state parts of it, so they can now do predictives with it where previously they couldn't. But in either case, you don't go sit under the table for 72 hours. You leave town. Hurricane coming. Leave town. Tornado on the way. Leave town. Global climate crisis. It's going to be global. Ooh. Yeah.
There's nowhere you can go.
Higher ground. Higher ground is always the answer.
Not for an earthquake.
Yeah. When's the last time you heard about an earthquake happening on top of a mountain? Never.
What?
Oh, no,
what?
That's the
what? There are different types of faults. You know that, right?
Yeah. Not mine. Okay. Not mine.
All right.
That's the only one I believe in.
Oh, Justin only has a limited number of faults. Yeah, not his fault. Yeah. This kind of predictive technology is the kind of thing that we've wanted for a very long time. So to be able to fine tune this, especially for those areas like California, the Ring of Fire, places that are going to be very prone to the possibility of massive earthquakes, this kind of preparation could make a huge difference.
Eric Knapp from Alaska says earthquakes happen on mountains all the time. Okay,
Yeah,
fair enough.
all the time, all the time.
Fair enough.
Not your fault though, Justin.
No.
All right, so a couple of really interesting brainy stories that I wanted to bring up here at the end of the hour before we head on out of here. Researchers at Stanford University have been, we've been talking about the mixing of human neurons and the brains of other species for quite some time. That lots of, we're going to grow human neurons in monkeys, in pigs, in mice, in rats. We're going to do all this. Okay, hasn't been super successful. We've seen a bit of integration to date. This new attempt, these researchers at Stanford University that have just published their paper have taken brain organoids. So they used human neurons, stem cells, neurons to grow organoids. So multicellular tissue that is at a very, at an early developmental state, but about 60 days or so of developing. So it's a little chunk of brain. And they made these little brain organoids, and in their paper in Nature, they reported in planting these organoids into rat brains. So they took rat pups, implanted the human brain organoids into a section, an area of the cortex of the rat brain that is related to sensation. So the somatosensory cortex of the rat. So, rat whiskers and the hair and other aspects of navigating their environment through the sense of touch are important. This area of the brain deals with a lot of these signals. And so these brain organoids, they got implanted in there, and lo and behold, nothing weird happened. The rats the rats were rats. The behavior was rat behavior. Everything was just fine. The organoids integrated beautifully. They weren't doing anything odd. There were no seizures, so there was nothing medically wrong. Nothing dysfunctional that could be determined about these rats as they grew and these neurons integrated. Additionally, they had the neurons tuned. They had previously genetically modified the neurons to react to light signals. And so optogenetically, they would be stimulated when they were hit with blue light. They trained the rats to go lick some water, a little water tube, when they were exposed to the blue light, and the neurons were involved. And so they showed that the neurons were part of a circuit, that when the neurons were triggered, the rats went and they got the water. And so good rats, they were rewarded with water. Everything was happy. So what? There's no weird. There's no. It's just. We're learning more about how the human brain can work. And so now what we know about this system in which nothing weird happened, the researchers were able to take stem cells from people with a disease that's very similar to autism, which is called Joseph's disease, I believe is what it's called. Am I getting that wrong? Sorry, I did get it wrong. Timothy syndrome. And so Timothy syndrome has similar symptoms to some that are seen in autism. They used stem cells from 3 people that have this genetic condition. They grew brain organoids, put them into the rat brains, and were able to show that those neurons did show dysfunction, that they did not react the way that the quote unquote ordinary or average human neurons reacted within the rat brain. So what this suggests is that we may now have the ability to create an animal model in which we can study human genetic brain disorders.
That's okay. Brilliant. That's exactly what I was going to ask. Is I feel like I'm missing. Why do we want to add the human organoids into rat brains? Like, what what are we achieving? So this is it. We want a better model to be able to study the human brain, to manipulate and do experimentation on the human brain to try to solve dysfunction.
Right. And so when you have an organism that is relatively long-lived, rats can live several years.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not dealing with mice that are, just going to be turning over very quickly.
Poor buddies.
Poor, yeah. But the rats also are trainable. They work very well in lab and behavioral experiments. And so this is the kind of situation where you could study particular behaviors that are potentially tied to certain genetic disorders and really determine the synapses, the signaling molecules, what is really going wrong within the brain.
You can do research
and how can we fix it in people?
On mice that you can't do in humans.
Rats.
Yeah. Rats in this case.
Rats.
But
right.
yeah.
So that's very fascinating for a whole bunch of reasons. Like a lot of these autistic spectrum or disorders are come down to missing genes or inactive genes or not turned on ones.
Mm-hmm.
There was one recently. This is a side thing, but in the Williams-Barre disorder, where they discovered that these people sometimes have these kids that have a learning disability, but they tend to have higher than average linguistic abilities, higher than average musical accoutrement, being able to identify pitch, which is really hard to think. Somebody plays a note and they go, "Oh, that's a C. That one's an E." That at a very young age, able to do this. And it showed that there was this overactivity of growth in the area of the audio cortex.
Right.
Because an RNA factor protein was not present to mitigate growth.
Right.
In the area. So the question that I have on these rat studies is how much does that travel in the brain? Like how is that expression taking place so specifically within those tissues that it's being expressed with the genetics of those tissues and isn't influenced by the larger brain system? So there's some really intriguing questions that might be able to be answered just in whether or not, it might look like a null result, right? It might look like, oh, we did the organoids things and we tried to replicate the behavior, but it didn't happen. And it may be because there's a more universal
because rats
factor.
don't play guitar. Got it.
Well, it might be because it's not the specific tissues. The specific tissues are not the ones functioning on their own. Anyway, it becomes a very much larger data set.
Yeah, because we do know. So there's there's going to be the connectivity within the organoid and what happens with RNA, with neurotransmitters, other things that are released very locally, but what happens at the places that they interconnect with other neurons within the rat brain, the rat neurons. So what is going to happen at those points, and what kind of limitations are there going to be as a result of, definitely a between species boundary? Yeah. Because the genetics are different between the rats and the human neurons. Definitely.
And could we develop a drug then that can specifically target some of that neurodegeneration so that one day everyone can have pitch perfect hearing?
Perfect pitch.
Do we
want to live in that
brain?
World? Do we even want to live in that world?
Of course we do. Perfect pitch is great. I wish I had it. It's
just not everybody has good pitch.
Rare.
Not perfect, but decent pitch. Yes. Okay, I have one last study. And how many of you out there played Pong as a youngster or have played Pong in your life? I see Justin raising a hand. Blair's played Pong. Pong is one of the original games, right?
I played it when it was the only choice.
It was the only choice for so long.
There was an Atari in my classroom in elementary school.
And you either had like a little slider or you had a little knob, and you
I had the
with the idea it's like tennis, right? And you have your little stick thing on the screen and it's bouncing the little Pong across and goes pong, 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 back and forth, back and forth. Anyway,
Is that the
humans can
sound
do
it
this.
makes? Is Pong?
Bong,
It's like
bong, bong. Yeah, and you had to move it to like channel 2 or channel 4 on the TV. Like the
Right.
old there was a standalone Pong console. You need to understand.
Yeah.
There was
But
a
is that where the
standalone-
title comes from? It's the sound?
And those are paddles, by the way. Those are your paddles that you're turning.
pedals. There were
Standalone-
sliders, but there were also paddles. It depended. Yeah, it depended. There were multiple versions.
And it was a piece of furniture.
Yes. Well, anyway, people can play Pong. AI can play Pong, but can neurons in a dish play Pong? Apparently they can.
Yes.
And so that is the new news coming out of Cortical Labs in Melbourne, Australia, which, it's morning there right now. Good morning, Australia. The researchers there have created a system that they call Dish Brain, which I think is one of the best names for a brain in a dish brain. And so they've got a bunch of neurons that they've got networked within a dish, and in the networking within the dish, they have different nerve cells. So very like just a slice of brain happening in a dish, and they attached this little dish brain to a circuit so that they could actually measure with electrodes the electrical activity happening within the different neurons as the neurons communicated with each other during a game of Pong. And they taught the neurons how to play Pong by giving them signals. So coordinated signals when the little ball, the pixel Pong was being hit correctly or in the right direction, randomized noise when it was not hit in the right direction or not, or the neurons missed it entirely. And over time, they were able to show that this signal, these neurons responded to an electrical signal that's a substitute for the ball in the game of Pong, but that in this, it's not just for fun, although the choice of Pong to show that, if AI can do something, neurons in a dish, the wetware can do it as well, is a good masterstroke. But then even beyond that, it's looking to see how we can train the messy biological network for the development of future biological processing units. So maybe our super AI is not going to just be silicon. Maybe it's going to be silicon and neurons working together in conjunction. And unfortunately, my first thought as I was thinking about this awesome, they trained nerve cells to play Pong. This is great. I was like, oh man, this is like, they're going to train these nerve cell systems to like take out enemy planes. And, it's going to be signal recognition. And, thank goodness I looked at the paper and none of the sources of funding seemed to come from any military background. There was not what appeared to be government funding from anything DARPA-like in any sense or form. And they were all programs funding just research into the human brain. So I was very pleasantly surprised when I did look up the funding sources for this particular study and this laboratory. And so Cortical Labs is on a very interesting path to determine whether or not we can use neurons as computers or as parts of computers.
That would be awesome. Biocomputing. But then you've got like another pet in the house, Blair. You got to feed it and water and make sure. It's like, it's like I'm going to go the opposite direction. The chat room is killing me right now. Fado, I begged and begged my dad for an early Odyssey console for just $100, and he wouldn't give. This was mid-1970s. And then Kevin Reardon pipes in, that would be $763.33 today. Sorry, kid, no bleeping way.
Yeah, except that's not that much more than a PlayStation costs now. They cost like $600, right? That's
what?
I
No.
mean,
Kids
yeah, I think
today.
so.
It's like a very special Christmas present. Very special, maybe.
Oh yeah. So there's one at Walmart for $739, a PlayStation 5. So there you go.
Oh, same price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But the other oh gosh. Yeah. But that's in today's money. Now you got to go into the future and find out how much that is.
Into the future. Well, we'd have to take inflation into account.
Hey, do you know
deflation.
what time of the part of the show it is now?
That time where we've gone way over our tight 90?
A little bit.
Oh, a little bit. What time, Justin? What time is it?
Is it the closing time? Start sweeping up.
One
Pick
last
the
call for
chairs.
alcohol. So finish your whiskey or beer. So you're saying?
Start putting the chairs on top of the tables. Get the mop out.
You don't have to go home, but you can't
stay here. Yeah, well, yes, it is that time. And I would like to thank everybody for joining us for another fun-filled episode of This Week in Science. We definitely went over our 90-minute allotment. Thank you for staying with us for this whole time. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed chatting with everyone today. I want to make sure, however, that we thank not just you, the viewer, the listener, my co-hosts, but also a few people who do help out with the show every week. Fada, thank you so much for taking care of social media and those show notes for YouTube. You do a great job, and it's really just wonderful to have your help. Thank you. Also to Gord and Arnlore and others who keep our chat room friendly and happy and chatting with joy of science. Thank you to Identity4 for recording the show, and thank you to Rachel for editing the show. And also, thank you to all of our Patreon sponsors. I'm going to say thank you to Teresa Smith, James Schaefer, Richard Badge, Kent Northcote, Rick Loveman, Pierre Velazard, Ralph E. Figueroa, John Ratnaswamy, Carl Kornfeld, Karen Tazi, Woody MS, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vigard Shefstad, Hell Snyder, Donathan Styles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Sharma, Reagan, Derek Schmidt, Don Mundus, Stephen Albaran, Daryl Myshak, pronounced Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fredis 104, Sky Luke, Paul Bronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Matt Bass, Vote Beto for Texas, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Rick Ramus, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Adam Mishkan, Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Disney, David Simmerly, Patrick Pecoraro, Tony Steele, and Jason Roberts. Thank you all for supporting us on Patreon. And if you are interested in doing the same, supporting us on Patreon, head over to twist.org and click on the Patreon link. On next week's show,
we will be back Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook channels, as well as from twist.org/live.
Hey, do you want to listen to us as a podcast, perhaps while you play some Pong? Just search for This Week in Science where podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes, links to stories will be available on our website, www.twist.org, as well as being able to sign up for a newsletter.
You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be camouflaged with a couple of eye spots, and it'll be too terrifying. We won't be able to open it.
we'll look left, we'll look right.
But you can still sneak up on us on Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, and at Jackson Fly. And at Blair's Menagerie.
Jeez, what
I
happened?
snuck up on you. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you tonight, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.